afternoon from Kigali. We're here at the MWC Kigali, and I'm together with Ralph Mupita, MTN Group President and CEO. Hello, Ralph. Nice to meet you again.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to engage again.
Perfect. You're welcome. MWC just half day passed, and you joined a panel determining the path to a digital future. From your perspective, what does that path look like for Africa, and what needs to happen now to make it really happen?
Look, I think we've been on a digital transformation journey kind of variously across the African markets, no different from what's happening globally, which is realizing that technology has the power for socioeconomic transformation in many ways. And one of the most powerful ways is obviously this revolution that the mobile internet has created, and created a bigger democracy, if you want to call it that, across Africa in terms of bringing the benefits of the internet. And so we've gone somewhere, and I would argue that we've just basically put the foundations. I think there are some successes that we can talk about. So if you think about coverage, which was a big issue, how many Africans are covered, I think the coverage gap, i.e. the number of Africans not in areas covered by a mobile network, that's reduced dramatically. And I think it's a single-digit number percentage, more like 9% Africans not covered by networks. But the big issue we face today actually is usage, which is what I spoke about earlier. And usage has a few components, but the ones we would call out are handsets and devices. They're still too expensive for most of our customers around in the continent. So we believe like handsets specifically need to be $20 to $30. They're landing.
We talk about feature phones. We talk about a smartphone.
This is a smartphone. It's not a feature phone. So this is a data-capable device that you and I would happily use for a lot of our communication and so forth. They're landing at about $50, $60. We need them $20 to $30. So we say as operators, the so-called G6, the 6 largest operators, we're kind of engaged in that handset opportunity to try and accelerate it. So that's one area. The second area is really around content. Is the content appropriate for the people of our continent? And often the content has got an Anglophone or Francophone, and for sure there are many customers who would like that. But there's a huge swath of Africans who are being left out because the content is not relevant. And so that's another area. Affordability, a lot of progress has been made. And now, of course, we're going into AI. So I would say handsets and content are two big issues now that need dealing with. But there are several other issues that I think we still need to engage in.
So when you look at content, you just mentioned we have the Francophone country, we have English-speaking countries. We also must understand we have a continent where we have over 2,000 languages.
That's correct.
So that's where we probably also leave people behind because we have not the relevant content.
Yeah.
And in that regards, do you think AI could be an enabler?
AI is absolutely an enabler. I think it's going to revolutionize the way we think about the internet and this digital transformation, the services that sit on top of it. And in fact, I've just gone to our stand here. We have an AI chatbot called Miss Baza. So if you go outside and look at the MTN stand, and what you get with Miss Baza is on a normal feature phone, you're able to do a voice call, and in your language, and at this instance we have 4 languages, you kind of voice prompt, and without having a smartphone, you're able to have Miss Baza engage the internet and come back with a verbal response. And it's a useful way of thinking about bridging the gap. But to your point, we have 2,000 languages. Now, we're not going to be able to have all these languages ingested, the content ingested into these large language modules to create the content necessary. But I think we can take an 80-20 principle, go country by country. Let's tackle the 2 or 3 largest and just kind of move systematically through. Because if we don't do that, in 10, 15, 20 years' time, we'll have a continent that's left out of the digital ecosystem completely. Because your content is not there, your points of view are not there, and then you create the systems that have biases and risks and all sorts. So it's super important that we start that journey now. And that's where we're talking about collaborating in an open source smart way to get these languages ingested into these models, ensure that the African share of voice is there.
So MTN has been at the heart of Africa's digital transformation over the last years. You have quite a big footprint on the continent. So when we look at Africa from a mobile-first continent, what would you say are the biggest enabler to become truly digital-first continent?
Well, look, I think the way to think about digital first, actually, you got to think about it generationally. You have, the 20-year-olds. The median age for Africa is 19. Huh? So when you think about that, it's quite a phenomenal stat that it's such a young continent. So by median measures, half the continent has been born digital. Now, they've been born digital without kind of the perfect digital infrastructure. Electricity is not always available in certain markets, power more generally. The access to, we've spoken about devices, can be limiting or is expensive. We spoke about content. But I think we are at that point where I think we've gone over, the very difficult parts of building these digital networks. As I said, coverage is not an issue. What we've got to think about in communication today is, how do we make sure that for low latency use cases that our people on the continent will need to use, we're there. So fiber has a role to play, as an example. So this is where we are pushing both the narrative and support that we need further fiberization for the continent. We don't need an overbuild, but we need sufficient fiber. But we also need, 5G networks, to shift the markets we operate in from the 3G era. We really do believe that the future starts at 4G. So a 4G, 5G network, you're a citizen that is enjoying the benefits of a digital economy. So there's still some work to be done. So this aspiration that, we have kind of a digital first, we're making progress, but we're not quite there. But the big things that we need really is investment, multi-year investments, and what will attract investment is having a regulatory environment that is conducive to capital coming into our markets. And we have some work to do around regulations there.
So are you optimistic if you look at a public sector regulation perspective?
I think the winds of change are blowing very strongly across the world from a regulatory perspective. And I think, as I said in the forum, the regulatory frameworks we have today were set up in a much more voice-centric world of communication. A data-centric, which is much more capital intensive, is one that's very different. So some of the areas we call out is firstly that nation states, be very thoughtful about having, national digital strategies and starting from there and say, as a consequence of this as a national digital strategy, what are our fiscal policies towards the digital sector? How do we tax? How do we do pricing frameworks, etc.? And I think that has some way to go. I think the other area is really around, how do you attract capital? I think there are two challenges for the African continent right now for attracting capital in the digital economy. One is the certainty of returns, given that the capital investment is often dollar denominated, and this is a capital intensive long-term business. So shareholders often say, in Africa, pricing is an issue. I know there's this flip side that says data is expensive. It's not that it's not expensive in some situations. For sure it is, but the input costs that come, how much you purchase spectrum for, how much you buy network gear for, that all creates the cost base. And most operators are not making returns above their cost of capital. So from a regulatory point of view, I think the other thing that we believe is inevitable is market consolidation. You look at the US 3-player market for 300 plus million people. China, 3-player market, 4.5 billion people. India, 2.5 players, let's call them 3 players in India, 1.5 billion. So, and in those markets, the operators, make a decent amount, not too excessive, but the people in those markets have got proper digital infrastructure payment systems. So I think we have a lot to learn, and I always say to colleagues to say, visit India, for example, 10 years ago and where it is today, a massive digital transformation. Africa can follow and have similar digital economy outcomes as India.
But do you think it has to be driven by the public sector?
It's driven by a partnership. We have a perspective as the private sector, but we can't operate by ourselves. We need the public sector as partners, and civil society more broadly. So I think what you really need are the 3 pillars of business, government, and society more generally to say, look, if that's the digital future we want, if that is the Africa we want, here is the roadmap, and here's how we all play. The public sector creates the enabling environment. The capital is available globally. You can see it in the way that the capital is flowing to the AI opportunities. So capital is not the problem. The conducive environment where capital can get a decent return is probably our biggest constraint. And what we need in Africa is hundreds of billions of dollars of infrastructure investment, lots of investment on energy, because this digital infrastructure needs energy. So the capital is globally not the problem. The capital is out there, but the conducive environment to track the investment with clarity for investors, that the regulatory environment will be predictable, will be fair, and so forth. I think we can resolve, some of the deficits that we have around digital infrastructure.
So when we look in most of the areas that we see a lot of rapid progress in areas like AI, 5G, and fintech, so how can we make sure that we make everyone benefit from it, not just a few markets, if you look even at urban areas?
I'm a big believer that, for technology to really be transformative is that it has to be inclusive. So I subscribe to the point of view that if 5G is good for you and I in the urban areas, it'll be good for people in the peri-urban and even rural areas. And so we've got to start with that framework that the digital economy must be inclusive, because you can't have digital underclasses, those who have and those who don't have. I think you create social and other inequities that become problems over time. So we have to have inclusion at the center of it. And even as you think about AI as an example, and there's the so-called job equation. AI is going to augment many jobs. Many of our jobs are already being augmented by AI. AI will create new jobs, but AI is also going to, destroy jobs. But if we make sure that augmented jobs plus new jobs is greater than the jobs lost, because it is a foundational technology after all, because it's going to completely disrupt ways of work, the way we know work and how we live. So there are going to be new forms of jobs that are created. So if we start with that in mind, with that inclusiveness in mind, we will navigate the challenges that come. And there's going to be some disruption. There was disruption when we moved to the steam engine. There was a disruption, with the computer era came in and so forth. There was disruption when electricity came in. So there will be social disruptions of some sort, but we must make sure that we can get through that storm, come out the other side with more jobs than we had before. Otherwise, we will have some real social ills and inequalities to deal with.
But it's also quite interesting if you see that Africa also has a huge potential to unlock, to create new jobs. Look at Arctech, for example.
Yeah.
How much farmland do we have in Africa, which is not really modernized, not well maintained, which is a huge opportunity, and technology can be as well an enabler through connectivity, through smart farming, etc. You can empower local communities, where you then also can get your revenue for the service you offer to them to be connected.
Look, you touched on a subject that's close to my heart, and I think when when you think about Africa, the next 2 to 3 decades, what's happening. I mean, we have this, demographic dividend that's coming our way, where by 2040, the largest majority of the working population will be in Africa. We best get ready for that and ensure that our, the young people, going through schools and so forth right now are equipped with the digital skills that make them more than useful in the decades to come. So that's pretty exciting. And then when you think about Africa and the areas that Africa can leapfrog, agriculture, agri-tech, very powerful to think about how do you improve yield production, on this vast, hectarage of arable land that we have on the African continent. I mean, the ability to understand weather patterns, even for the rural farmer, to say, listen, this is the information that helps you with weather patterns, market making information, a lot more precise, agriculture and so forth. You can get significant yield productivity out, across the continent. So agriculture is one area. I think there's a big opportunity also in healthcare. We have a very low, doctor, ratio for the African continent. So good doctors, but not enough. So how do we democratize that through technology? And then the other one that's very close to my heart is education. Is sometimes your own outcomes as individuals are a function of the quality of education you got access to. So what stops us democratizing high quality education by providing, we spoke earlier about devices and handsets that enable a child in rural, Rwanda to be able to access the high quality education that other people can in urban areas, Kigali, Johannesburg, Lagos, and so forth. So it's got a power to transform and equalize, and I think that's super exciting.
Very interesting. My last question, and also congratulations, you recently surpassed 300 million subscribers across Africa. So what does this achievement represent for you, and what comes next?
Look, at MTN, thank you for that comment, but you need to thank those that came before us at MTN, because this is 3 decades of work, and this is 300 million across, all the markets that we operate in, and we operate also beyond the African continent. I say, the journey and the work is just at the beginning. We are laying the digital infrastructure, and I think over time what we'll find is that the services that sit on top of the infrastructure are going to become more and more important. And today we celebrate passing 300, makes us quite a sizable operator globally, but we've got a long way to go. When you look at the usage gap in Africa, it's significant. It's almost like 2/3 are not 2/3 of Africans are not regularly engaging the internet. That says, wow, that's a challenge, but it's also an opportunity. So we've got to find ways through handset and device initiatives, making sure that we bring all the forms of technology. Today we have not spoken about satellite. So low Earth orbits and terrestrial infrastructure is all going to create the experience of our customers always being on. And if we attract the capital, deal with the energy deficits that we have across the continent, I mean, Africa's GDP would grow tremendously. And so we look forward to the next 100 million. And this last 100 million took just on about a decade. Hopefully we can solve the next 100 million in half that time.
Oh, we're going to catch up on that for sure.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time.
Much appreciated. Thank you.
It was TechAfrica News from MWC Kigali. You can find more on techafricanews.com.